Morning all, Sean Barton here from Tortoise IT, doing another one of my little in-car chats to myself whilst driving along and legally, etc, etc. It is 0 degrees, 8:54 on a Friday morning, and I am freezing. I have my gloves in my pocket and I don't get them because I'm cold. I don't know what the logic in that is, but there you go. Okay, so this morning's sort of 10-15 minute little chat is about responsive development, and responsive is a term that if you know what it is, then a lot of this talk probably won't be of any relevance to you, so switch off now and go buy my stuff. Haha. No, do buy my stuff. But if you don't know what responsive is, I'm not entirely sure about the ins and outs of it, and you'd like to find out a bit more, then viewers, stay on board, find out more, and then buy my stuff. No, so my level of experience goes back quite a while in terms of sort of website development, and when I first started doing this, I'm going to assume you know a bit about HTML. Not a lot, just a bit. And well, we used to use tables in order to lay pages out. We'd have frames where you could have a menu to one side or at the top, and that could have one HTML page showing, and then the other side you'd have the page content itself, which would show another HTML page. And when you click something in one frame, the other frame would react, and it was like magic, and it was just absolutely brilliant. However, move forward a little bit. Tables. Well, we used to use tables for laying out pages, so you'd have one table row for the header, and if you wanted rounded corners, well, good God, you'd have to have a table with a very, very narrow first column and a very, very short first row, and you'd have to use background images or borders, and it just never really looked right. I mean, it kind of worked. I mean, people, one thing that people have been very good at over the years is innovating and getting things into what are slightly limited systems. But tables were a fixed width generally, but we didn't really use percentage widths then. They were a fixed width, and we would say the left hand cell would be the menu and the right hand cell would be the content, and it was just an easy way of laying stuff out. Now fast forward a bit further, and these things called divs came along, and you had to put suddenly so much more effort into building out sites, because you couldn't just use a table tag without modifying, without adding some a table tag requires pretty much 0 CSS in order to get it to work for a layout, whereas a div is a block element without any styling whatsoever. And so if you put a div and then another div, you're going to end up with one sentence or block on top of another block, and so you have to do what's called floating. Float left, float right. I think there's a float center. No, there's not a float center, is there? There couldn't possibly be. But anyway, and when you float a div, it sits it next to something else, and we had to then go into the style sheet or use inline styles, so style equals whatever, and we had to type float left width 50%, float left width 50%, or float right, whatever, and that would sit two things next to each other, and that's okay. But the fact is, we used to use tables where you could just type it all in and not have to do any of that stuff, and it never worked. I mean, don't even get me started on vertically centering things. That's an absolute nightmare. I mean, in a table you can use v-align or vertical align middle, which put things, would you believe, nicely in the middle of a cell. Well, in a div, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've had to creatively use margin and padding to try and make it work, and woe and betide, the text in that column goes into 2 lines and you're stuffed because it sits just below center. Now these days we have something called flex, which is obviously an awful lot easier, but I'm not even going to go into that. And so you could develop sites using these divs, which were the sort of de facto standard for building sites. And if someone said, oh, it's table based, that's awful, they'd be right. But unfortunately, it took me a few years to realize that these people were right, so I carried on using tables. And a few years ago, the term responsive was started throwing around. People started saying and requesting, especially agencies that I work with, used to say, oh, but are the sites responsive? And I'm like, maybe. Let me check. And of course what I was doing was Googling the word responsive quickly and finding out what on earth this is all about. And I have to say, the first responsive site I worked on even looks fantastic today. The reason why is because it was developed by somebody else, or at least the design was, and the grid system was, and grids I'll talk about later, but it was fantastic. Really, really good. So responsive development, I would quote a price for a job, and then I would quote a price to have it responsive. So it was quite nice actually. It was an additional thing I could upsell to people, but the concept of making sites work on mobile phones, because ultimately that's what responsive means. Responsive means how to make a site respond. There you go, there's the responsive bit in there for you. Respond to different sizes of screen. And put lightly, that means if you're on a tablet, the screen size is different to what it is on a mobile and a desktop, and therefore we should probably show different stuff. I mean, for instance, if you've got a big header with loads of menu items, and you get that into a mobile, what you're going to get is a big long list of menu items, or a big scroll bar actually, horizontally, which is no good at all on a mobile device or a tablet. And so we used to quote and add extra money on to make things responsive, which generally means adding these things called media queries into the CSS. Now, a media query is a way of telling your style sheet to only observe or only look at the code in that particular block when certain conditions have been met. So it's sort of like logic really in the style sheet, which has revolutionized everything, and it's fantastic. So what you do is you declare all of your normal CSS in your style sheet. I'm talking about desktop first, I don't do mobile first, although it's more or less the same. You work to a screen size and build your site normally using CSS. And then what happens is you tell that you use one of these media queries. It's @media if you want to Google it, but just Google media queries. I'll give you a code example. And this @media thing is a block, it's got curly brackets around it, and you can put stuff inside, and I mean selectors and sort of more CSS. So whereas normally you'd have your class name selector or whatever, and then a curly bracket, then what you want to do, and then a closing curly bracket, you'd have a media line, @media, screen, and min or max width equals, colon, whatever, then a curly bracket, and then in there you'd have your normal CSS, so your class selector, your background, curly brackets, and then at the end of all that you'd have another closing curly bracket. So it basically puts the normal CSS that you want into this @media tag. And normally these media queries, these media lines, the logic is all to do with the screen size, and so it says when the screen size is bigger than this and smaller than that, or when it's bigger or when it's smaller, do this. And as you know, or hopefully know with CSS, that when you declare something secondary, so you have background color red on the body tag, and then further down you'll have background color green on the body tag. What color is a background color? Well, it's green, because the red one was declared, and then further down that same file the green one was declared with the same selector, and therefore the green one takes precedence. Okay, so in a media query it's just effectively doing that, but switching those on and off. So background color red, and then you say @media screen, and that tells it whether it's screen or print, and I'll come into print ones in a minute, and let's say max -width :768, and then obviously closing, opening curly brackets, etc, etc. I won't go into the exact notation, just Google it. So logically, if you saw the code, it would actually make sense, and it basically says when the screen is smaller than 768 pixels, then do this, then obviously the background color green stuff would obviously come into effect. But otherwise, that logic isn't met, and therefore it wouldn't bother doing it. So background color red is always there. It's not in any sort of media query. That's just the default sort of settings for the background color. And then when your screen is smaller, so max width 768 means this code is valid up until a max width of 768 pixels. And you can do an awful lot with it. It's really, really clever, actually. You can do things to do with pixel density. So if you're on an iPhone or whatever, and you're on a Retina display, you can show larger images. Something called a print, at media print, and not at media screen. And that says when you print out this page, which is great because you can basically do things like hide the sidebar, hide the header and footer, have the content, etc. Or you can do what I have done in the past, is have a big hidden div at the top of the site that says that basically says, please don't print this page, it's copyright, or something like that. And I give it a class of print and hide display none on print normally. But in my media query, I say at media print, and then I say class name of print display block. So it will obviously print out something entirely different to what they wanted in the first place, which is amusing to the nth degree in my mind, anyway. Okay, so we've got our background color example. Okay, so and these things tend to sit, I mean, I like to put them at the bottom of the style sheet. So all of the CSS that you write normally just occupies the style sheet, and then just completely forget about the fact that you've written all that stuff, and then go into your browser and just drag the browser in until it starts to look bad. This is just how I do responsive sometimes. So you take a desktop size, which will be setting the container about 1,000, 1,200, I think about 1,200 normally. So at 1,200 pixels or more, the width of the content container, the main box around the website, is at 1,200 pixels. And so it won't get any bigger than that, just the space beside it gets bigger, which means that you don't have to worry about anything more than 1,200, which is great. And as you make it smaller, you can do one of two things, one of a few things here. You can modify the width of the container massively. So you can say at 1,220 pixels, make the container 1,000 pixels, which means that as you get to that screen size, as you drag your browser in, that box around the website shrinks by about 200 pixels, but it means that everything in between you don't have to worry about. You're not having to think, well, at 1190 pixels, that text looks a bit odd. You don't have to worry about that because you've actually made the container smaller, which subsequently shrinks everything inside it. And so if any text is going to look bad, it's going to look bad at the new container size, which is when you can go and add another breakpoint. And you just work your way down to mobile like that. Some people do lots and lots of different breakpoints. There really is no problem in adding loads of breakpoints. They aren't particularly processor intensive. It's all client-side processing anyway, so it basically processes that CSS as your as if it's normal CSS, and it just adjusts based on the screen size. So really is not a heavyweight thing to do to someone's browser. And I find actually, particularly with some really bespoke builds, some stuff just, I mean, Divi's breakpoints are, I think it's 980 for tablet and 7 something or other for mobile, or which is quite a lot of, so I'm just doing a junction, quite a lot of capacity there. In the mobile environment, you've got about 700 pixels to work with, and sometimes things look a bit weird. So you might want to put in another little breakpoint between 700 odd and, I don't know, 400 odd, which says this is a mobile phone in landscape view. And actually that's what people do. They'll build breakpoints depending on what device or device band screen size range they're working with. Typically that is mobile portrait, mobile landscape, iPad landscape, iPad portrait, and then desktop, and sometimes you'll have a large desktop as well if you want to make the container even bigger. But that really is for quite bespoke sites. I mean, in Divi we have 3. We basically have desktop, mobile, tablet, and it works, you know. I mean, it's not always 100% perfect, but it saves having to create loads of different sections and adjust the media queries on them every single time, and it's really infuriating. Now, Divi. Out of the box, Divi does responsive quite well. It puts the burger menu in, the 3 little lines that you click instead of your top navigation, and it sort of flies in. It all works quite seamlessly, actually. Right, I'm at the marina now, so I better be quick. It all works quite seamlessly. We have the columns, the grid system, how many columns you've got in your row. They will automatically adjust depending on the size of screen you're on, and based on the media queries that are actually built into Divi and Extra. So there really is no need to do really anything with the actual base responsiveness. In fact, I very rarely do any targeted sort of grid-based responsive work on my on the sites that I build. What I tend to do is, if I'm building a particularly awkward section for somebody, and it's based on a design or whatever else, then it has to be right, and so that's where custom media queries come in. So just finally, because I've got about a minute before I get out of the car, so hang on there, 16 minutes and 3 seconds. Divi, the Divi builder, and I do talk about the Divi builder because I don't do the visual builder, so sorry, I can't help you with that. So I'm sure it works the same way though. Good luck, you're on your own. Divi builder, you are able to right-click any section, row, module that you like, and you'll see a disable button, or I forget what it's called now, but it's like third one down, and it's pretty obvious. You see a disable button, and disable doesn't necessarily mean turn this off or I don't want this. What it means is turn it off on certain devices. So it's slightly ambiguous, but that's all right. We can live with ambiguity. That's such is the nature of the beast. Okay, here we go. I'm parking up, so I'm just going to finish this little chat and go and put my fire on. The disable box that you'll see in the Divi builder is immensely useful, actually. Now take this example. You have a site with a left-hand sidebar. The sidebar is quite long, and on a tablet and or a mobile, everything, if you've got 2 columns side by side, as it goes into responsive mode, or desktop, the smaller screen, okay, as it goes to a smaller screen, what naturally happens to those 2 columns is one goes above the other one, and that's intentional. If you want, they want that to happen, and that's fairly normal in responsive development. If you have columns, turn the engine off. If you have columns, then oh, it's windy out there today. Never mind. If you have columns, then you can't have columns all the way down to mobile, because 2 columns or 3 or 4 will look ridiculous on a mobile. You can't really have things side by side, because if it's text, you'll never be able to read it, because it'll either be too small or too long. And images will just, you're not able to read them either. So what we tend to do is, down to a tablet, a 4 column will turn into a 2 column, and then the other 2 columns will sit below, and a 2 column will turn into a 1 column, and so on. On a mobile, then the 2 column turns, everything's 1 column on a mobile, sorry. Unless, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we can write media queries, because some stuff, if it's a couple of icons that you want side by side, that's not necessarily possible without messing around with media queries. Okay, so these disable options allow us to turn stuff on and off. So I'm switching subject again quickly, but so all right, finish that one off. Divi will put stuff side by side, and I will just reiterate now: 4 columns on a desktop doesn't mean 4 columns on a tablet or a mobile. It means 2 columns generally, or 1 column. It will adjust it, so don't worry, that happens. Now, what happens is the leftmost column will, so a sidebar in our case, will go first. And then below that will be the next column along, and below that will be the next column along. So if you had 4 columns of desktop, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 in a line down. Now that starts with your sidebar, and it's really long. Every single page on a mobile that uses that similar sort of left sidebar layout will mean the user has to scroll past a sidebar before they can get to the actual page content, which is infuriating. It's stupid to the nth degree. It's not Divi's fault. That's naturally how it happens. I mean, you designed it with a left-hand sidebar. It's your own fault, really. In theory, that's kind of why, now I'm thinking about it, all the Divi sidebars are on the right, because without telling anybody, naturally, the sidebars appear at the bottom. Okay, so there you go. That's myth busted for you. just cleaning all the dust off things in my car. I've got a bit distracted now. Okay, so if you want a left-hand sidebar, which is fairly common actually, if I'm honest, what we do is we use these disable controls in the Divi builder, and we will turn off that module or that column, whatever, entirely at that screen size, and put another one somewhere else, which we turn on only at that screen size. So when you get down to the mobile side of things, you essentially turn off one sidebar, you turn off one sidebar and you turn on another, and it happens seamlessly, so you never see a flick or a change, it just works. So as the screen goes from tablet to mobile, everything rearranges itself, but at the same time, one box disappears and another box appears. There's no animation, because you don't animate things showing and hiding in responsive, because it's just weird. It just doesn't make sense to do so, tough. And so your screen then on a mobile is the content followed by the sidebar, whereas on the desktop it was the sidebar left of the content. Now, easy way of doing that, and I'll just finish up now, is in the Divi builder, your disable option that you can right click on any module, row or section, you can click on or off. Effectively, they're on-off switches for different screen sizes. So if you wanted to have an entire header section, let's say it's a a big header that looks great on a mobile, but no, on a desktop rather, but rubbish on a mobile, you right-click the section container, I mean, all of it. If you just do it on the section, then everything inside that section follows the same rule. Because if I've hidden the box that your Christmas present's in, I don't leave the Christmas present there for you. I hide the Christmas present as well, don't I? Yeah? So it's all there. So you right-click the section that holds this big header, and you click disable on the mobile. Yeah, so you click disable, and you click the icon for mobile, and it'll go red, or I think it goes grey, or something like that. It shows you that it's not going to show it. And then you publish the page, and that's it. Nothing else to do. It's really handy actually. So with our sidebar example, you might have a column, a 4-column layout, and you just right-click the sidebar module, or you right-click the first column, or however it's going to work, and you just disable the tablet and/or mobile, and it will work. Just the same way on the far right-hand column below the final piece of content. You don't have to make a new column for it. It's fine. Put the sidebar module on the far left below any other modules that you've got there, and just right click, disable, and disable for desktop and or tablet, and it won't show, and you don't have to do anything with it ever again, and it just works. Final thing, one thing that we do like to do in responsive is adjust things like padding on boxes and font sizes. Why? Well, because if you've got a 50 pixel header on a desktop, that looks great. If you've got a 50 pixel header on a mobile, it looks like someone's just fallen on the keyboard and you can't see a thing. Then text wraps around and it looks blimmin' awful. And to some degree that actually matters on a tablet as well. So font size, 50 pixel header. So in the advanced design tab of every module within Divi, custom ones as well, I believe, when you set a size, you just drag the little slider across, you'll see a little picture of a phone appear, and you click on the picture of a phone and you'll get 3 tabs, and they rather kind of ambiguously say desktop, tablet and mobile. I mean, what could they possibly be for? Well, I'll tell you, because it's not clear, is it? So the one that says desktop is how big that text is on a desktop, and then you click on the tablet tab. There's something in there. Tablet tab. There you go. And you can make that 50 pixels down to 30 pixels, and then you click the mobile tab, and you make it down to 22 or something, and then you publish again, and magically, as you make the screen smaller, that 50 pixels turns into 30, turns into 22, and it just looks so much better. For the sake of a 2-minute job, you know, on each template, you really should be taking into consideration the size of your font. The other thing is padding, okay? I actually make extensive use of padding. What I like is in a section, so I'll have a green section, so Tortoise IT's colours are green, so I'll have a green background colour. And then in that, I don't particularly like seeing normal size body text on a colour background, because for me it looks weird. So what I tend to do is I'll have the section, which is the full width bit, in green, and then the row, which is the contained, it's like the box side of things, in white, and then I'll have the text as normal. And it has the right amount of weight to it for me, and it's quite, so you can have a look at that, sean-barton.co.uk, go and have a look at any of my internal pages, and you'll see white boxes on green backgrounds, and I think it looks quite good. I mean, I'm a crap designer, I'm not a designer, I'm a programmer, so it looks awful, but that effect is quite pleasant. Okay, so the padding, you have to set some padding, because if you have a background colour on a row, and your text is actually butted right up against the edge of it, and it just looks weird, you know, you need spacing. So I'll go into the row and I will set 40 pixels, top right, bottom left, all the way around, 40 pixels. Now 40 pixels on desktop looks great. 40 pixels on a mobile means that your text is about that big. It just looks rubbish. So padding and margin, that's padding. Padding and margin boxes work exactly the same as text size. When you click into one of those boxes or start typing or whatever it appears, you'll see the little phone icon, and you click it, and you'll have those 4 boxes: top padding, right padding, bottom padding, left padding, and the same for margin, for all the 3 different breakpoints, the 3 different, we call them breakpoints, okay, just but the 3 different sizes of screen. So desktop, tablet, mobile, which means that on a tablet I can have 30 pixels, and on a mobile I can have 10 or 20 pixels, and it just looks so much better. I mean, 40 pixels means your text is this big on a screen that's this big, and it doesn't look right, or this big, just a size, just picture it. And 10 pixels means it's right up to the edge, but you've got a bit of a border around it, and it looks a treat. So, in conclusion, don't use tables for laying out websites, use divs, but you know that already because I'm going back years now. Don't use frames, because even further back, use divs. Don't even use code, but use Divi, okay? That's the whole point of this talk. Use a Divi builder and give things class names if you want to, using the advanced tab as a class name box. Put a word in there. And then you can target that in your custom media queries, which can go either in your Divi theme options custom CSS box or your child theme CSS. Recommended to put it in the child theme. If you don't know what a child theme is, watch my child theme video, which I made the other day. Another glorious 20 minutes of your life gone, but it's good. It's a good bit of fun to watch, and we have a laugh. Well, I have a laugh with myself, and I'm hoping you laugh along whilst watching the video, because, well, I've got to do this for something, right? Anyway, buy my stuff. I don't yet have any responsive type products on the market, and so I'm not going to try and sell you anything. But if you have any questions about this or responsive development, please do get in touch with me, or post something in the Divi Theme Users Facebook group, or the Tortoise IT help and support group that I've got on Facebook as well. So more than happy to help you guys out. Any ideas for things that would make your life easier when it comes to Divi or modules, please do let me know as well. I'm always looking for new ideas and things. So anyway, I hope that has explained to some degree what responsive is, what not to do, what to do, and now to go and Google media queries and to not be afraid of them, because it's just basic logic in a style sheet. Now, I probably haven't explained it too well, but I'm hoping that I've explained to you that actually using the Divi builder, you don't have to worry about all that rubbish. You can just right-click and disable stuff. And if you're not satisfied with the built-in breakpoints, then, well, you have to go and learn some CSS. But otherwise, things will be fine. Right, guys, thanks very much. 28 minutes, 30 seconds. It's not too bad for me, as the first talk I did was an hour long. So have a nice, what appears to be a snow and icy day, and I'll do the same. I'm going to go and get warm. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.